Movies with a shared continuity are all the rage these days. And you've really got one movie franchise to thank for that. Iron Man. When the movie debuted back in 2008, no one could have predicted the effect it would have on movies for years, decades afterwards. And as it happens, Marvel Studios, Kevin Feige, and Jon Favreau really laid the groundwork for the forthcoming Marvel Cinematic Universe by stuffing in as many Easter eggs and hidden references as they could in this flick. So let's go over them. The terrorist organization in Iron Man is actually so much more than a comic version of what terrorists should be. They're actually an organization known as the Ten Rings. In the comics, well, the Ten Rings are synonymous with one guy, arguably Iron Man's greatest nemesis, the Mandarin. He's an extremely powerful, near mythical villain who possesses 10 rings that allow him to manipulate all sorts of things, like heat, cold, electricity, and more. We got to see an alternate version of the villain in Iron Man 3.
My name's Trevor Slattery.
But according to Kevin Feige, we'll see the true Mandarin appear in Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. At the start of the movie, Stark is kidnapped by the Ten Rings and forced to make a hostage video, where the terrorists go on to reveal their plan and even discuss their alliance with Obadiah Stane, the big twist in the movie. And if you don't speak the language they're speaking, well, no harm, no foul. But if you did happen to speak the language, well, the movie was spoiled for you within the first few minutes.
You did not tell us that the target you paid us to kill was the great Tony Stark. As you can see, Obadiah Stane, your deception and lies will cost you dearly.
In this little montage, we get a few glimpses of what's to come, particularly the arc reactor and hints of AI, which would pave the way for Jarvis. Oh hey, there's Tony's drone buddies, and he said he wasn't nostalgic. From the very beginning, Stane was very clear where his allegiances lied, but with that big old pinky ring he wears throughout the movie. A ring that looks suspiciously like Raza's, the leader of the terrorists' ring. Iron Man helped make the former B-grade Marvel hero a household name. But it wasn't the first time he had tried to adapt the character from the comic page, such as the Invincible Iron Man cartoon from 1966. Iron Man includes a nice callback to that series, as you can actually hear the cartoon's theme song playing during several scenes.
Tony Stark makes you feel he's a cool exec with a heart of steel.
Work it! Come on!
That's exactly the kind of Easter egg that Marvel's known for. Christine Everhart might have just been a reporter working for Vanity Fair and Iron Man, but in the comics, well, she actually worked for the Daily Bugle, where again, she reported on Tony Stark. But over in the MCU, this isn't the last time we see Christine, seeing as how she became an anchor for world news, interviewing people like Ant-Man, reporting on events like the Battle of Sokovia and the Lagos attack. Like father like son, I guess. And here we can see the Stark family crest, complete with a double-headed eagle. It's a symbol of power and empires, just like the Stark Empire in the business world. In this music video playing behind him is Ghostface Killer, who's a giant Iron Man fan. He actually was going to make a cameo in the movie before it was cut. Want to know the real reason why Stan couldn't sleep? Well, it's because of this 3-hour delay earlier in the movie.
For 3 hours, you got me standing. Waiting on you now. Let's go. Come on.
He had to wait and make sure that the attack was successful. So, he had to call Tony and check on his progress. And here we get the first glimpse of Tony building the arc reactor. Presumably, this is where the idea came from. And we hear Pepper's voice, one of the only people that Tony truly cares for. Fun fact, Iron Man's Mark I power sequence It's actually a firmware downloader for LEGO Mindstorm's RCX controller. See this guy, the first terrorist to be killed by Tony? Well, that's actually Tom Morello, the guitarist for Rage Against the Machine. Which is, well, it's fitting. And here we see that Tony is a changed man. Right before the attack on the Fun V, Tony was talking about his views on peace.
Please, no gang signs. No, throw it up, I'm kidding. Yeah, peace. I love peace. I'll be out of a job with peace.
Yet when he gets out of the cave, the first thing he does is flash a peace sign, showing how his character has grown. When Tony returns to the United States after months spent in captivity, his first request is to grab an American cheeseburger. According to Robert Downey Jr., this story beat was inspired by real-life events. In an interview with Britain's Empire magazine, RDJ specifically thanked Burger King for helping him get clean back in 2003. As the story goes, the actor was eating a burger from the chain in his car, which was full of drugs at the time, and the burger tasted so disgusting that it made him rethink his life and caused him to dump all of his drugs in the ocean. I kinda hate to think about what would have happened if Burger King didn't suck at making burgers. Considering it's the very first entry in the MCU, and they didn't even know if it would be successful, Iron Man is pretty light on the shared universe setup work. However, the film does introduce us to S.H.I.E.L.D. and Agent Phil Coulson, both of whom will become important fixtures in subsequent movies. Throughout Iron Man, Coulson repeatedly refers to his organization as the Strategic Homeland Intervention, Enforcement, and Logistics Division, finally shortening it to S.H.I.E.L.D. near the end of the film.
The Strategic Homeland and
just call us S.H.I.E.L.D.
What you may not have noticed is that S.H.I.E.L.D. stands for something different in Iron Man than did in the comics. Originally, it stood for Supreme Headquarters, International Espionage Law Enforcement Division, but it was changed to Strategic Hazard Intervention Espionage Logistics Directorate in 1991.
That's what we do. We're ironmongers. We make weapons.
Hey, foreshadowing. On his way back from New York, Stain brings Tony pizza from Ray's. New Yorkers will recognize Ray's as being a famous chain of pizza places in the Big Apple. But what you may not have realized that this is also the second film directed by Jon Favreau to feature the chain. In his Christmas movie Elf, Santa Claus recommends Ray's Pizza to Buddy the Elf.
There are like 30 Ray's pizzas. They all claim to be the original, but the real one's on 11th.
In this same scene, Obadiah Stane plays a classical music piece on the piano. The piece was written by 18th century composer Antonius Salieri, most famously known as the jealous rival of Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. There have been theories that Salieri actually murdered Mozart, but historical records have proven this false. In fact, both composers had collaborated and promoted each other's work on several occasions. But if we stick to the theory of him being a bitter, potentially murderous rival, well, this parallels nicely with Stark and Stane's relationship in the film. When Tony first flies with the suit, there's a small spark as he exits the garage from hitting the wall. His heads-up display alerts him with a red indicator, warning before he hits. You can also see that his heads-up display measures speed in Mach. Mach is the speed of sound, so the fact that it can measure in Mach speed means that it can already go faster than speed of sound. It's crazy the detail. If you freeze the movie at just the right time, you can actually see Tony's eyes staring back at you as the Iron Man suit freezes, which is just creepy. Remember the scene of Obadiah playing the piano? Well, here we see Iron Man crashing right on through that piano, destroying it, just like he destroyed Stane's plan. Oh, nice! Gold armor. Now where have I seen that before? As Iron Man fires up his blasters, well, you can actually see the energy traveling and going from the reactor to the blasters. And as he suits up, you can actually see the dust and fingerprints on his mask. Like I've been saying, it's crazy how much detail they put into the CGI in this movie. But also, really not surprising, seeing as how that's where the majority of their budget went. It's no secret that Tony and Rhodey graduated from MIT together, and as we can see here, during the phone call between Stark and Rhodes, there's a big gold ring on his hand. This is MIT's class ring, otherwise known as the Brass Rat. Notice what they're calling the F-22s, what their call sign is?
Ballroom, this is Whiplash 1. I've got the bogey in my sights.
That's right, Whiplash. Throw in this scene.
1987. That lovely lady you woke up with. What was his name? Was it Ivan?
Don't do that.
And well, you've got a pretty nice hint at who the villain for the next movie is gonna be. And here we get our first glimpse at Captain America's shield, or at least Tony's version of Cap's shield. And seeing how much his father talked about Steve, and how Howard idolized the guy.
Oh really, you two knew each other? He never mentioned that. Maybe only 1,000 times.
It's really not surprising that Tony would try his hand at recreating the famous shield too. It's a blink and you'll miss it type of thing, but when Pepper's flipping through all the files on Stan's computer, you actually see Lebowski and the dude pop up. When Stan has Tony paralyzed, he talks about how he's glad that Stark survived the terrorist attack, because he was able to create the miniaturized arc reactor. He called it Tony's Ninth Symphony. But there's actually a curse associated with the composer's Ninth Symphony, saying it's destined to be the composer's last, and they'll die shortly afterwards. People sometimes give the MCU, especially Phase 1, a lot of flack for having villains that are essentially just an evil version of the hero. And there's definitely some truth to that. But in this fight, well, Iron Man really isn't fighting against Obadiah Stane, or the Ironmonger. He's fighting against himself. The older version of himself. The version that didn't care about others or who he was hurting with his weapons. The man that he was before he went into the cave. I mean, he's literally just fighting against an upgraded version of the armor that he built in that cave. And on top of that, Tony has to use the things that he's learned since then in order to beat the Ironmonger. The icing, the flares, disassembling the suit just like he disassembled the rockets. And most importantly, trusting Pepper. It's not as simple as just good Iron Man, evil Iron Man. The whole fight can be seen as a symbol for the character growth that Tony has gone through throughout the film. During the highway battle between Iron Man and Ironmonger, there's a building in the background sporting a Roxxon logo. In the comics, Roxxon is a notorious petrochemical company that was involved with illegal activities. It was introduced in the movie as a fictional version of the actual company Exxon. Roxxon was later referenced again in Iron Man 3, with the Mandarin capturing and executing a Roxxon executive as retribution for an oil tanker spill.
Thomas here is an accountant for the Roxxon Oil Corporation.
Inspired by the infamous 1989 Exxon Valdez oil spills. It's another blink and you'll miss it type thing, but as Pepper is looking over the control panel, you'll see one switch labeled palladium gas. Yep, the same stuff that was killing Tony in the sequel. You take a closer look at that newspaper, and you'll see the headline, "Who is the Iron Man?" and a blurry picture of the Iron Man armor. Well, that picture was actually taken by some paparazzi while the movie was filming, and was thrown up online. So it's actually pretty ingenious that the movie just decided to use the picture in the actual movie too.
What about the whole cover story that it's a bodyguard? He's my body? I mean, that's kind of flimsy, don't you think?
This isn't my first rodeo, Mr. Stark.
Now, why does this sound familiar? Well, because this is actually the excuse that the comics used for the first few issues. The Iron Man was just Tony Stark's bodyguard, before Tony came out and told the world the truth. Hey look, damage control.
You've got 90 seconds.
Coulson actually wasn't kidding. It really is 90 seconds till Tony gets up there and starts speaking.
Been a while since I was in front of you. I figure I'll stick to the cards this time.
The post-credit scene in Iron Man let us know that alongside Tony, we were entering into a much bigger universe than we had thought. But originally, that universe was going to be a whole lot bigger than we could have ever imagined.
As if gamma accidents, radioactive bug bites, and assorted mutants weren't enough.
Instead of just referencing the Avengers, in an alternate take of the post-credit scene, Nick Fury makes reference to Spider-Man, the Hulk, and the X-Men. And that was before Marvel even owned the IP rights to those characters. They might have gotten a little bit ahead of themselves with talking about the X-Men, but it's really cool to see that Marvel is swinging for the fences from the very first get-go. So there we have it. Those are some of the details and Easter eggs in Iron Man. What did y'all think? I would love to hear your thoughts. Sound off in the comments down below. Also be sure to hit that like button, subscribe button, and turn on notification on the Fanco Army. And I will see you next time.